the Cybersecurity and Compliance Podcast with Craig Petronella. Learn about the most current IT security threats in ransomware, phishing, business email compromise, cybercrime tactics, cyber heist schemes, social engineering scams, as well as hints and tips from leading professionals to help you prevent hackers from penetrating your network and dropping ransomware or malware payloads. This podcast will arm you with the best info to defend your network against the latest cyber crimes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, here's your host, Craig Petronella.
All right. We are live.
Hi, welcome back, Craig. It's good to have you back.
Thanks.
We missed you.
Definitely some interesting things happening.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Just almost caught an alligator when out with my son.
Better than an alligator almost catching you.
Yeah.
Which maybe that happened too. I don't know.
No.
Where were you when this happened?
Yeah, so we were camping with my son. I think it was called Arapahoe in North Carolina. It's by the Neuse River. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's kind of far. That's like inland, right?
It's about 3 hours from Raleigh. Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't really expect an alligator to be there, but I see a lot of them
I
down
don't
here
think
in
anybody
South
was. Especially at a camp with a lot of kids.
No.
Yeah.
You said you have a video?
Yep. I got a video and a screenshot or a zoomed in clip of the video that it's pretty.
Okay. I want to see this.
It was probably a good long gator though.
You told us it was 12 foot.
No, it's not 12 foot, but it's big enough to eat somebody.
That's huge. Yeah, there's a couple 8-foot gators around here, and it's like, stay away.
What'd you say, Blake?
I was going to ask how big it was. So you literally came and let us know the size of your feet,
Yeah.
how capable you are of handling an alligator.
Yeah. So I guess PTG keeps you safe from gators.
We can always get into the gator security business.
That's right. You never know what you're going to get when you go fishing.
That's true.
So.
And something else that we want to talk about today that's maybe not quite as interesting for most people as catching gators, but compliance. Always a good Monday opener.
Yeah, everybody wants to wake up and talk about compliance.
Oh, yeah.
So I think you guys were asking about compliance regulations that most people don't know that they're subject to.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Sure. So you probably all heard of Hipaa, which is for medical, but I don't think a lot of people understand that there's two sides, or technically three categories for Hipaa. There's what's called the covered entities, which is the doctor's office, the hospitals. There's what's called the clearinghouses, which is the insurance companies. And then there's also the business associates, which is anyone that interfaces or interacts with the covered entity in any way, shape, or form. And that could be your IT guy, your IT provider. It could be an accountant or somebody that has access to the books, but anybody that could potentially be exposed to the patient health information or PHI can be considered a business associate. And you, as a provider, should have what's called a BAA or a business associate agreement in place, which is a legal document that basically says that, hey, if you ever come in contact with patient information, you're going to keep it confidential and you have an obligation to secure it. So you are now subject to the same safeguards as the covered entity. So it's a trickle-down effect. So that might be something that a lot of people are unaware of, that most people, when I talk to them and they have an IT guy that they're happy with, and yeah, Bob's been fixing our computers for the past 20 years, So do you have a BAA with Bob? What's a BAA?
That's a no.
Didn't know I needed one of those, So yeah, so there's definitely risk and liability there. And if you get caught, then you can both be subject to steep fines and penalties. That's one common one. Other new one that came out is affecting CPA firms and bookkeepers. That came out in January of 22, which is this year. And that one basically is a similar regulation to Hipaa, where there's safeguards and you have to have policies, procedures, and safeguards in place to make sure the sensitive information, the taxpayers that you're working with, you're keeping their social security number, their tax returns, and their books confidential. And you have security controls, supporting evidence, making sure that you're doing all this stuff. And it goes back to the same stuff that we've always been saying on previous episodes around risk assessments, pen tests, and all this evidence that are proving that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And I just want to throw this in there, sorry, but is it true that tax fraud, especially by cyber or by hackers or bad actors, has increased over the years, especially with the advent, a lot of people filing their taxes online? There's a lot of people that have their information stolen. I would imagine maybe that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously in a climate right now with heightened risk and adversarial threats and, hackers' favorite tools in the toolbox. So what I was saying is that hackers really like keylogger malware as one of their tools. And keylogger malware capture any kind of keystrokes that are, if you're not using keystroke encryption, then the keylogger malware will capture all those keystrokes, including social security numbers, passwords, anything sensitive. So my point is that, yeah, the regulation, they probably are starting to, hey, look, a lot of these CPA firms and bookkeepers are exposing consumer information. And, we're talking specifically about the new regulation that came out in January of 22 that affects CPAs and bookkeepers and any of the intermediate third parties that are involved with the handling of those sensitive tax returns and tax information or financial information. But, there's also what's called FTC regulation. Federal Trade Commission has federal laws around the sensitive data and the safeguarding of that sensitive data. And like I said, I mean, we're in a different climate now, a heightened state where everybody is really it's a matter of time. No matter what business you're in, you're going to be subject to some type of regulation. I guess the best one that most people are probably familiar with is credit card. We got PCI compliance or payment card industry compliance. If you take credit cards, you're subject to PCI compliance. A lot of business owners will not really understand that very well. They'll probably be outsourcing the acceptance of credit cards to maybe a third-party provider like Square Payments or QuickBooks or, some solution that they purchased or that they use in their line of business. But the point is that when you use those solutions, you can't outsource your responsibility for the proper handling of the credit cards. Now, they may provide a good platform to keep that information secure, but you as the business owner and you as the business have what's called a merchant account, and you have an obligation and a responsibility to keep that information secure. Now, there might be a platform, like I said, that you have that is out of your control, but if you read the detailed terms and conditions, there's typically things that you need to do, and you need to what's called attest to and sign off on it. So what that means is that by allowing your business to accept credit cards, you have responsibility and obligations that you can't outsource, that you must do and that you must do properly and test and self-attest to and sign off on, hey, you're keeping this information safe and secure. And that's why we keep talking about these assessments and these practice assessments and these pen tests and all this stuff, just to make sure, because, we're all humans and we don't do everything perfectly every single time. So we need help and we need third parties that are trusted to test all this stuff and, hopefully catch it before an audit.
Not all PCI too is the same. So like you said, using Square does not absolve you of your PCI compliance. And obviously the organizing body recognizes that. So there's 4 different levels of PCI compliance. So for example, merchants that are handling less than 20,000 transactions per year are what's called level 4. And then it goes up to level 3, 20,000 to 1 million, 1 million to 6 million, to over 6 million card transactions will be at a level 1. So, these are things that obviously you have to do. And obviously it costs higher to be a level 1 compliant than it does to be level 4 compliant.
Yeah.
So, a lot of businesses, there's no excuse for sure.
And as you go up that ladder, using transaction volume, the number of transactions, as well as transaction size or average transaction size. If you let's say you're Ticketmaster and your average ticket sale is $50 or $100. If you do 10,000 sales in a day, you're obviously going to be on the higher level of your mandates around PCI. And they're not going to take, with that volume, they're not going to just allow you to sign off and say, yeah, we're doing all this stuff. They need the proof. And there's actually a PCI certified assessor that will need to come out. And that's the third party check and audit that you'll have to go through in order to keep your business and keep the acceptance of credit cards at that volume and that average ticket size. Most businesses are probably smaller and they don't have that kind of volume or that average ticket size. So they'll allow you to have less strict regulation, compliance, and alignment. But the fact is that you can't outsource the responsibility, and everyone needs to properly safeguard this information. And everybody should have the mindset of, hey, look, I'm not only safeguarding it, but here's my proof.
Another one that Aaron were talking about before we hopped on this podcast was obviously people that are doing business within the state or have customers within the state of California, CCPA.
Yep.
And GDPR.
Yep. There's California Privacy Act. So CCPA, there's also New York's privacy law. Different states are now adopting their own levels of privacy and their own regulations that you have to follow. So you've got like these more recognized standards and frameworks like NIST. We've talked a lot about National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. Specifically in the Hipaa space, it would be NIST 866. In the federal space or defense industrial base, that we talk a lot about, that those folks are subject to DFARS and NIST, and now the CMMC 2.0 compliance regulation. You've got different frameworks. Even small businesses, they have a framework for small businesses. They have computer information security. The FBI has CISA. There's all these regulations and there's all these frameworks that are out there. Most commonly in our country, in America, there's what's called SOC 2 Type 2 for a third-party audit that a certified accounting firm can audit a period of time for a business. Maybe your business is small and you want to do business with a larger company or a more mature organization. Those larger companies, they measure the risk of the vendors that they do business with. So we have what's called Vendor Security Questionnaire professional services, where we help a lot of those folks get through the maze of questions. And sometimes it's pretty daunting, 300, 400, 600 plus questions for the business profile, the small business to fill out, just so that they could start getting on the approved vendor list to do business with the bigger guy. And when that becomes a daily occurrence where all these different companies are asking you to fill these things out, oh, and by the way, they won't allow you to rinse and repeat and reuse somebody else's questionnaire. They will not allow that. They make you fill out their own questionnaire, and they make you fill out the evidence that goes along with that questionnaire. So if you're getting buried with all these different VSQs or vendor security questionnaires, you may want to consider a SOC 2 Type 2 or an ISO 27001 audit and compliance framework, because those frameworks will allow you to no longer fill those things out. And most large organizations recognize that a SOC 2 Type 2 report or an ISO 27001 is very powerful. ISO 27001 is really powerful outside of America. SOC 2 Type 2 is more common in America, but they are different frameworks. They're very similar, but ISO is more the global standard. So that's a way that, like I said, when the volume gets too high and it's really just, they're starting to bury you and filling these things out, that's when you would consider that. We can certainly help with those types of regulatory compliance.
Do you think at any point things are going to become more standardized, like where all companies are supposed to follow these rules?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that NIST has done a really good job of the new CMMC framework. And my hope is that more regulations will adopt that methodology and reduce the need for all these other regulations. Meaning, HIPAA came out and was signed into law in 1996 by Bill Clinton. I mean, that was ages ago. Look at how different we are from internet and cybersecurity now versus 1996, right? So there's no clear guidance around HIPAA, so it's a very gray area. So CMMC 2.0, for example, could definitely overtake and bolster and better secure our medical offices and hospitals if those would follow the CMMC 2.0 framework opposed to HIPAA. So I think in America, I think it's really going to be it's going to come out of the federal government, and it's going to be a decision there on standardization. And I do think that that would be a good thing to simplify and help not only, private sector, but also our defense industrial base. And if everyone, is following that same framework, it'll make it simpler. And I think more people would actually do it.
I think too, one thing that I've noticed, one of the biggest differences between HIPAA, really CMMC and a lot of the other regulations, I feel like a big difference is that CMMC really focuses on trying to integrate cybersecurity into the culture of the business, as opposed to just making a checklist for you to check off. Like they try to really get you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. I feel like, I'm not saying they always win in that arena, but I feel like the thinking behind it is really smart and really more up to date, because the checklist approach is just not good enough anymore.
Well, I think that's a good point, Erin. I think it's pretty obvious that checklists and self-attestation is not good enough anymore. I think that's really the whole reason why the federal government came out with the draft of CMMC version 1. And basically the big change was you can't self-attest anymore. You need these third-party audits, and you're going to have to find a C3PAO, and you're going to have to go to the marketplace and basically prove your compliance, right? And, when in November of 20, when the DFARS interim rule came out and the federal government said, hey, look, we know defense industrial base supply chain companies that are out there. We know that you self-attested, but we want to really see who's really has the proof, who's able to upload their score to the SPURS system. And, how many of you guys of the 300,000 plus DIP companies, how many of you guys have a perfect score of 110? And, I think that there's still companies on the sidelines that have still not submitted their score.
Right.
I think there's still confusion around, well, do I need to submit my score or does that apply to me? And I think people are still not educated enough on the responsibilities of, hey, look, I signed off on that contract. I took that money. What do I need to do? And I think that people forgot or glossed over all of the responsibilities. And that's where I think there's a lot of confusion right now with the DIB on, what is the CMMC? Why do I need to do that? And then people get hung up on, well, CMMC is not really the law yet, so I'm not going to do anything. Well, most DIB companies already have a contract. And if you already have a contract, you're subject to the DFARS 7012, 7019, 7020, and NIST 800-171 mandates. And you've already signed off on it. So it's already been done, and it is the law for over 5 years. So this is not new information. There is, and I'm not trying to scare people, but the reality of the situation is the federal government does have what's called the False Claims Act. I know for certainty that the audits have increased. The government is auditing more DIB companies. And, these people that are just sitting on the sidelines doing nothing are going to get caught. And then they're going to be in this remediation period. They may lose their contracts depending on how bad the situation is. They may get penalties and fines, so it's a bit of a mess. So I think that standardization would be a good thing. I think that third-party audits are a good thing. I mean, even our company at PTG, we have to get checked from outside third parties for our work to make sure, because we're looking to mature and go after the CMMC certification ourselves, So we're not just recommending our clients do this. We're actually going through it ourselves. And I think that it's a good thing to have somebody check to make sure.
Oh, I think this is a great opportunity to pick Craig's brain. And obviously, so these compliance regulations are always evolving and always changing. Other than working with a firm like ours, what are some actionable steps that maybe a company could take to stay current and up to date? Having a rudimentary, to stay current with what's changing, because these regulations are always changing. They're always refining them. They're always adding new articles. And we've had, when I was working with another client of ours, they asked me about that. And I was like, good question, because these are always changing. So other than hiring somebody like us or working with somebody like us, how could you summarize that?
Yeah. So selfless plug is, stay tuned to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I mean, here's the reality. We live and breathe this stuff, right? So, I mean, we're always getting the latest information. We're making sense of it. We're distilling it down. So we're your shortcut. We're your easy button, right? But if you don't want to use us or for whatever reason, I mean, the FBI, like I said, puts out CISA. There's different like I said, the NIST.gov website, National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST.gov. They have a wealth of information there. But here's the thing. You can go get all this stuff for free, and that's great. But are you really going to be able to read and digest and understand a 300-page PDF from NIST that's very technical and even difficult for us to go through and simmer down and make sense, and then translate that language to something that most people can understand? I mean, the information's all out there. It's all public, but we're that shortcut. We sift and sort it. We make it easier to digest. And then we help companies of all shapes and forms get started with this stuff. A lot of companies can go to our website, or they can go to the federal government resources and maybe pretend that they're a defense industrial based company. It could be any kind of business. It could be a construction company. It's still a good exercise for that construction company to go through the self-assessment process for CMMC, for example, even though they might not deal with controlled unclassified information. That's not the point. The point is that it's a good exercise from a maturity standpoint to go through the self-assessment to identify all of the stuff, the policies, the procedures, the security controls on all of your systems, and get value from that, because every single person and every single business is currently at risk from data exfiltration, ransomware, and other adversarial threats. There's all new evidence with the whole thing that's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine. There's new adversarial threats coming out all the time. So this stuff affects everyone. Even a consumer can go through the free resources and bolster themselves. But, it's kind of like diet and exercise. Who's going to wake up and actually do it?
I've noticed too, a lot of our clients, they don't have too much understanding what they need to do. It seems like the biggest problems with them are implementing real world strategies that make them compliant.
Well, like I said, nobody wakes up and says, "Oh, I'm gonna read this 300-page PDF today on NIST," and they might have good intentions, and maybe they'll get 30 or 50 pages of it read. But I'm telling you this, I mean, I don't know if the last time you guys have looked at this, but this stuff is really hard to digest.
I read it every day, Craig. I read it every day.
It's bedtime reading. Use the example of exercise because I think it's a good analogy. A lot of people, they want to lose weight and they want to be in better shape. So they buy the latest gimmick or buy into the latest book on, the South Beach diet or whatever the latest thing is, or the craze. They're in the psychological and emotional buying decision. I'm going to buy that thing, that book or that video series or whatever. But their mind is thinking when they make that transaction, that's the easy button for them to get the result that they want. But the reality is they learn really quick how much work it takes. You're not just going to get a 6-pack or, lose all that weight without putting in the work. So what I'm saying with compliance and regulation is you as a business owner, you as a consumer, there's work that you have to do to make yourselves better fit for cybersecurity. And the less fit you are, the more ripe you are for getting hacked or having your identity stolen.
I want to kind of add on to that too. Just like, if you get a physical or a personal trainer, or if you get a gym membership, just because you get those things or buy an entire video, collection of yoga or whatever, you still have to do the work, even if you have people to guide you. So working out to lose weight or to get into shape with your cybersecurity.
That's right.
We are an easy button, just like a personal trainer is an easy button. They can't do all the work for you, but they can show you how to do it.
Yeah. Like, so for example, staying on kind of the fitness thing, because I think it's easy to understand for most folks. Like you ever see like the Weight Watchers commercials where, you get all the food and you get our meal plans and everything's all kind of laid out for you, right? All you got to do is eat it and then go do the exercise. So with our compliancearmor.com security training, for example, and our policies and procedures, we've done all of the hard work for all of you guys. 80% we get you there, but you still have to do the last 20 because we don't know what kind of business you have. We don't know all the details of how you like to do business. Those fill in the blank answers are for you and for you only to customize and tailor this solution that we've created for you. That's, like I said, 80% there. So we've done as much possible work that we can to get you there, but you need to get yourself to the finish line. Now, we'll still be your personal trainer in that, and you can hire us for consulting and professional services, and we'll give you that accountability, and we'll be that shoulder to lean on for questions and, how do I do this? How do I do that? And then we'll meet with you at a cadence that you can, afford, as well as that support for your time. And, we'll get that work done with you and we'll help you. But ultimately it's your responsibility. You're the one that's signing on the dotted line for that self-attestation, or if you have a more modern regulation, you're the one that's signing off on that contract to get that contract award. It's ultimately your responsibility.
And then I have another question for you, Craig. And Blake and I kind of touched on this a little bit last week, but what do you think is something that the U.S. government could do to get everybody into cybersecurity, understanding the importance of cybersecurity hygiene, or what, even just for the DIB, right? What are some things that you think the government could do to help see sort of quicker, started more quickly?
Yeah. Good question. So I've said this before. I think that the federal government has really good intentions, and they had great intentions when they came out with the beta of CMMC 1.0. In my opinion, I feel like they diluted it and really lowered the bar to CMMC version 2.0. 1.0 had 5 levels, 2.0 has 3 levels. I think we have a great framework right now that we can further fine tune and customize. I think the problem right now, the big missing puzzle piece, is we're not getting enough support from the federal government around, this is what you need to do by this day and time. And this is what's going to happen after this day and time. I'll give you a perfect example. When the DFARS interim rule came out on November of 20, they said, look, you need to upload your score for your self-assessment on NIST and DFARS. It's a negative 203 to a positive 110. You need to do this by December 1st is what they said. And then they said, if you don't do the upload and you don't have a perfect score, you have 6 months of POAMs, plan of action and milestones, which is basically, I'm going to fix this gap. This is how I'm going to fix it. And this is the day and time it'll be fixed. And you're going to get yourself that perfect score of 110. But here's the missing piece. The missing piece is they say that you're not going to get that contract renewal. And they say that, you need to show evidence of this stuff. But I don't feel like there's enough clarity around that. I feel like it shouldn't be this distant vision in the future. It should be, look, you need to do this and you need to do it by this day and time. We'll put it 2 years out or a year out, or whatever the time frame is. We need some day and time that this must be done and direction, clarity from the government. Look, January 1st of 23, everyone needs to do this. And if you don't have this, you don't get to participate in the supply chain. Or, we need more substance.
More teeth. They need more teeth.
Yeah, teeth. Correct.
Really bite into that.
Yeah. And I think the same thing for health. Like I said, with Hipaa and these other regulations, why not just take this as the opportunity to say, look, if you're a business and you're handling any kind of sensitive information, consumer information, credit cards, birthday, personal identifiable information, or PII, any PII, let's group it all together. Any PII, PHI, anything sensitive, right? If you, by January 1st of 23, you have to be this level. And if you're PHI, then you need this other level. And if you're CUI, then you need this other level. My point is, let's have a framework. Let's choose CMMC 2.0 And let's say, look, if you're a business, if you want to take a credit card from somebody, you have to do this. And if you don't do it, you can't take the credit card. And I think that we need more teeth in it at all levels of any type of business. And the same thing with consumers. If you want to go on the internet and you want to buy something from a merchant, just like if you want to go and you want to drive a car, it's a privilege to have a driver's license. Maybe it's a good idea to have a cyber license. If you want to go on the internet, you're going to have basic training and you're going to be audited and tested, and you need to renew it every so often to make sure that you are being responsible with your information online.
Now, that also kind of goes back to something Blake and I were talking about. I'm sorry, Blake, where we had the idea, and Blake said that he talked to you about this too, starting with cybersecurity young, like in elementary school kind of thing. Now, out of curiosity, I don't have children. I do have lots of nieces and nephews, but I'm just curious, do they have the classes like that? Like in their computer classes, do they teach you any sort of cybersecurity lessons?
My children are too little right now to be able to comment on that. I do know that I have been asked and have done many continuing legal education and many continuing education for medical and for other colleges and universities. I did a lecture at North Carolina State University a few months ago. So I've been hired to give good information around cyber and compliance. I don't know what the quote unquote basic training is for younger kids. I think it's a great idea and it should be baked into the program, but I don't know what the curriculum looks like for that. Like I said, I think that especially for young kids, like I'll give you an example, like with Facebook, and social media, there's all these documentaries out there around how our youth and our smaller and younger kids are getting subject to all these different things like TikTok and I'm not just calling out TikTok, I'm saying Twitter, everything, Facebook, you name it, fill in the blank, social media. It has some damaging effects for, growth and emotional, just all these damaging effects and I'm not singling out any of these providers. I'm just saying, I don't think that these providers really knew what these effects could be. Right. And I think that we all as a population in society have probably had damaging impacts from mobile devices and just computer, so there's like positives and negatives, right? Like, so computers are great to get things done, but, maybe there's what's called addiction with mobile devices, and then there, it's a real thing. There's detox of, cutting the cord of your phone and constantly checking for notifications and things like that. Is that I don't know what the curriculum is, but I think that that's a great idea. And maybe there should be some federal program that creates almost like a NIST, but a NIST for kids, right? Like a framework for that, where, look, if you have a kid that's this age to this age, you should complete this level of education. And maybe it's an online kind of course, right? And who knows, maybe we'll create it, because we have a university too. So that's a good idea that we could create. But my point is that whether it comes out from the federal government, I think that there should be guidance around that and kind of best practices to best educate the youth and the young.
I think especially with something else Blake and I talked about, especially with like social engineering and things like that, because there really are real world consequences. It's not just, it's just Facebook. No, I mean, even look at, what was it, Craigslist? I mean, they had people going around like killing other people like this, you know what I mean? Like we really need it. I feel like we got too big for our britches in a sense, and that, we are really quick to really take up the internet, but we weren't quick to we didn't really think about the consequences, right? So now we're seeing the consequences play out in the real world. And to me, it seems like, and actually since Blake brought this up, I've really been thinking about it. I mean, the biggest solution I see to this is start them young. You said your kids are too young, but I mean, I'm guessing if they don't have phones, they probably have iPads, right? So they touch apps and stuff.
Well, actually, my kids in particular, we don't allow them to use a device unless it's kind of supervised.
Oh, yeah.
We don't just give them the device unless we're like in the car on a road trip or something. We don't really give them free reign of a device. We have, measured time with our kid. We're strict with that stuff. Well, and I'm not saying we're perfect either, but I do think it's a good point. But here's the thing I think this stems from. When the internet came out, it was kind of like this anonymized area in quote unquote cyberspace where anyone can kind of go and quote unquote surf the internet in anonymity, right?
Right.
But I think that now, and I'm a privacy advocate, and I think but I think that there should be two sides, meaning I think that if your purpose on the internet is to, like I said, there should be some responsibility at the consumer level. But what if we had followed the quote unquote driver's license responsibility thing? And what if in the future, the government said, look, if you want to use the internet, you have to have your license to quote unquote surf the internet. And it's no longer a private, you know how we have like IP addresses and things like that we get from our internet service provider. Well, what if one day that we all had assigned our own number, kind of like our social security number, and that was our identity online? Wouldn't it be interesting to look at it? I'm not saying that I'm advocating for this. I'm just saying that just kind of go through the journey with me. What if everyone had their own IP address and identity online? Don't you think that would kind of have an impact and effect on cyberbullying, for example?
Yeah.
Definitely would be a safer place for sure.
If your IP address was always the same and everywhere you went, you had fingerprints of you, it's you, right? Don't you think like it would be safer, like Blake said? And, if I have an identity or a static IP address that identifies me or my child, and then there's cyberbullying happening and there's supporting evidence that that, okay, that's this kid, right? You would think it would impact that. I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so too. I mean, you wouldn't be if somebody had access to everything you said and everything you did online, you would probably think about your actions a lot more than if you could be anonymous.
Yep. Very
much so.
Who knows? Maybe the blockchain could record that, or Web 3.0 could kind of be that ledger, so to speak. But I think it would be interesting though, like if we use the driver's license example, if you drive a car, you have to have a license, you have to pass the test to get the license. But you still have freedoms. It's a privilege to drive the car, right? But you still have freedoms. Like if you want to break the law, meaning speed, you can, but you have consequence too, right?
Right.
If you think you're not going to get away with going 80 miles an hour in a 55, you have the freedom to do that. But if a police officer, scans you with a radar gun or laser gun or whatever, or finds that your car is the one that's breaking that law, they're going to pull you over, write you a ticket. So what if we had an internet that was kind of like that in the future? That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Our two big ideas were, so obviously like when I was going through high school, they required that we take 2 languages.
Mm-hmm. I remember that too. Yeah.
One of them, obviously, English, and then I think I opted for Spanish. What do you think is more useful in my world right now? Obviously, not only because I'm in cybersecurity, but imagine that if cybersecurity was required curriculum in these schools. But not only that, me and Erin were talking more from a younger, more adolescent. So we had the idea, it's like, okay, your child is old enough to run an application or to choose whatever game they want to play on the tablet, for something as simple as saying, okay, little Johnny, click on this application or you click on your game. And of course, that first application would be a VPN or some, something along the lines to create some security.
Well, it should be kind of like the rules of the game. In that context, it should be the rules of the game, right? So like if you want to excel and get to the next level, you have to abide by the rules. If you don't, then you don't get to the next level, right? So it should be kind of like almost like a rewarding points-based system.
Our second big groundbreaking, but our second big idea was, so obviously if we think about this before you buy a car, you have a Carfax, right? So thinking about a Carfax for a business. Okay, before I go to this business, my money Here is their health, their scorecard. Here is their,
Came up with that several months ago, cyber score.
I think we were talking about, I don't know where it's stuck in my head, but it really, to me, like, is an idea that makes so much sense.
Well, it makes so much sense. It helps things to become standardized. You know what I mean? Like if you want to get insurance, you can do all of those things at once. Like Craig was talking about, you have 17,000 different forms that you have to fill out that say the exact same thing. Well, if you have this cyber score, cyber credit score, whatever you want to call it, I mean, then it's just right there. Also, what I was thinking about when you guys were talking about, I don't know, something earlier, but like, I feel like if things were standardized, then companies are going to be more apt to do kind of like what Blue Shift is doing and what other companies, vendors that we've worked with are doing, which is mapping what they like the controls that they can provide to whatever compliance, whatever regulations are required. So, if you have like one standardized CMMC for everything, right? I mean, every single vendor that we work with is going to be like, wait a minute, let me figure this out for you guys, right? So it would just really help each other.
Well, that's what I was saying several months ago when I thought of that scoring thing. That's where I was going. I was saying, look, if everyone would just standardize on like the CMMC, and let's say, your score ranges, from a -203 to a +110, that could be one way to do it. But then we started talking about it. Maybe it would be better not to use numbers like that. And maybe it would be better to just do A, B, C, D, and F. That could be a way, but we have the resources and the technology to help people increase their score. And I would love to see in the future, maybe adoption of our methodology around the scoring system, because I mean, look at it from a risk profile. If you're an insurance provider, do you want to insure somebody that has an F, or where your risk of paying out a claim is exponentially higher? Or do you want to give the guy that has, or the girl that has an A on their score, maybe they get a break on their insurance because that your likelihood of a payout is extremely low.
Right.
I can already imagine it right now with the browser bar. Whenever you type in like a .com, tells you like A+, B-, So
yep,
it's kind of taking like the previous idea where, our current scorecard idea and bridging the two, because once you access the website, okay, they got a B-. Okay, why do they have a B-? Like, how do they handle data? Okay, here's how they scored, and here's why they scored B-.
Yep.
And here's some solutions too. It would be easier to find solutions for them as well.
Yeah. Oh, if you want, I was thinking more like in a broader scope. Oh, if you want to use this website, we highly suggest that you use VPN or use a QR or
Well, what comes to mind too, ironically, is food labeling. Like you go to the grocery store and maybe you have a gluten allergy or a wheat or a peanut or tree nut allergy. Right now with the way that things are labeled, it's a mess. I mean, even with food labeling, there's cross-contamination. The labels are not clear. So not only do we need work and a score in cyber, but we need it in other things like food labeling too, because I think it would just be a positive impact for everyone, right? I mean, I think that, like you guys said, what I came up with the scoring thing, I think it would bring clarity. I think it'll bring much needed clarity for folks. I think that if businesses had like a code of conduct to adhere to, or maybe the government came out with some more guidelines around it, or maybe there's tax incentives. Like, look, if you have a better score, we're going to give you a break on tax. Some type of positive impact and support from the government, I think would be helpful too. But I think that some type of global recognized, or at least North American at the beginning, and then a global recognized standard is much needed.
Now that you bring up the food industry, and this is just my understanding because I've watched some of the documentaries on Netflix that talks about the food industry. these huge slaughterhouses and these mega monopolies that have people sitting and acting in government that are making legislative decisions in favor of them. Do you feel like that's the case for cybersecurity? Do you feel like our cybersecurity hygiene on the government level has been stalled by things like that? Or has it not yet creeped into our industry yet?
That's a really interesting point. I think that my opinion is that everything's affected by that stuff. I'm not going to get political, but you exercise your right to vote to trust that the person you're voting for has alignment with your values and beliefs, right? But there's no guarantees that they actually do what they say, right? And a lot of, stereotypically speaking, when I say this, but when a lot of, elected officials say one thing in a campaign and then not do something else. My point is, I think that, like you were mentioning, Blake, there's certain foods that have, monopolistic behavior, certain companies of certain sizes. Yeah, absolutely. Like one thing I'll reference with the CMMC, there was a lot of pushback from the little guys, the DIB, the defense industrial base, the smaller companies in the supply chain. There was a lot of pushback around CMMC, NIST, and DFARS in general, saying that it was going to be too expensive and cost prohibitive and nobody would do it. And then, they would say only the big primes would do it. Well, if you think about that for a minute, our company, PTG, we found ways to help the little guys, to make it affordable. And it really is truthfully affordable to get these scores at a level where your small business can compete. Does it cost money? Absolutely, it costs money. Is it millions of dollars for most? No, it's not. Is it a fraction of a cost of your contract? Yeah. It's definitely a cost of doing business. And we believe that it's almost like a minimum effective dose to be able to, quote unquote, get your driver's license to be able to bid on these contracts. Right. But absolutely, I do agree that big companies often persuade or influence, for sure. Absolutely.
I feel like the government, couldn't they give grants? Like, I feel like that would make sense. Like right now we have trillions of dollars exfiltrated. We have trillions of dollars in data exfiltrated by bad actors, and enemy states, basically. So to me, it would make more sense that, these things are not free, unfortunately. It takes time and it takes money, even, if you do get a cybersecurity firm. So I guess I kind of don't really understand, although I guess in the past, the cost of NIST has been kind of built into contract, right? And a lot of people just haven't used it, but.
Well, it's not the cost of NIST, really. It's more, I view it as you've got this foundation of your business, right? And with NIST and DFARS, you're attesting that you're going to do the NIST 800-171 stuff, right? But sadly, I would say that most people don't even know what they signed off on. So they don't realize all the stuff that they were supposed to be doing. I don't think that it was necessarily baked into the contract. I think that it should have been, before signing off on it, it should have been evaluated by the business owner or the stakeholders around, look, if we want to go after this contract and this contract's worth $10 million, we need to realize that it's going to take us X dollars to be able to fortify our systems and get them up to speed just to be able to get this contract. It's again, a cost of doing, but it's an investment from that DIB company to be able to then have access on these opportunities, these new opportunities. And I think that the challenge, especially with the federal government and politicians, the challenge is, how do we keep freedoms in place and choice without being biased? And I agree with that. I'm not saying I want to be told I need to do something in a specific way, but I think that that's also where there's the big confusion point around some of this and where people don't know where they can get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if they would just make a big cybersecurity initiative, and like really push it and grant money to people, to businesses, all of the businesses, not even just the DIB, right? If we want to really get our cybersecurity
Well, and it doesn't even have to be grant money. What if it was just a tax break? Look, we're going to give you, businesses get crushed. Our own business gets crushed with taxes. Wouldn't it be nice if, look, you get your score to an A, you get X percentage off on your taxes to help, with that pain and that burden, I think that could be a good idea. I'm in favor of grants too. But I think the point that I was trying to make is I don't want to be told that I have to do it one specific way, because the landscape's constantly changing. We want to make sure that innovation continues to happen around XDR and other layers in cyber. And we want to make sure that we have the choice as a business owner. We have the freedom to choose one vendor over another. Obviously, we negotiate on our clients' behalf better deals for our clients. So that's why it's selfless plug, good to go through us. But the truth of that is that we truly have vetted and tested these things. That's why we really, that's part of our mission and our value, to make sure that we are that easy button for folks. But that's why we do that. And that's why for the past 20 years, we work on not only making those good relationships, but making sure that the stuff that we partner, that it actually works. There's so much stuff and so much money that's wasted, and so many promises from a good salesman or salesperson or saleswoman that persuades the company on the other end. Oh yeah, this is going to make all your CMMC or Hipaa or whatever the framework is, all your worries go away. This thing, it does it all. It's the silver bullet. But then, there's companies that truthfully are out there that will take your money. I mean, I've heard all sorts of horror stories from small businesses just getting ripped off. And I think that if there was more teeth in it and more direction and more clarity around these frameworks, and reducing the amount of frameworks that we have, maybe down to just the CMMC or whatever whatever they want to call it, that would make it simpler and easier to understand for people. And like you were saying, Erin, before, there's, a lot of crossover, different mappings from one regulation to another. We're all trying to say the same thing, and one author of one framework might want their framework to be the global standard or whatever. And that's all great. But I think that if it comes from the government, like the CMMC, for example, I think that could be a good clarifying moment for a lot of people. And then let there be freedoms and competition in the marketplace. Here's a solution for this. And again, it goes back to the labeling I was talking about, right? So like if our vendors, Microsoft and Apple, if they all were regulated and subject to this framework, and they all were better able to label their products and say, this product is going to meet access control domain and give you X points on your SPUR score. And, make it easier, label things better to make it easier for consumers and businesses to pick and choose products based on how much of a score impact they'll have. I think that would make things so much easier for a lot of people.
You missed our podcast. I don't remember. I think it was last week, but I feel like this is such a good thing to bring up at this moment. But I think, Erin, it was our statistics podcast, sorry, where we talked about percentage of your revenue that goes to security. So let's just say you're a freelancer or, a self-contractor. Once you get a check that comes in, you take a percentage of that check and you put it aside and you lock it up in a vault saying, hey, this is for when tax day, and the tax man comes knocking at the door, April 18th. So you have a reserve set aside. I think if it comes to mind immediately, I think, Erin, it was 6 to 11% of your revenue should be dedicated for IT, cybersecurity, things that it just depends on the data that you possess. And obviously it's going to be more if you're a government contractor, or maybe less if you're selling blankets at the flea market. That's something too that I think people need to understand. And then I even found a deeper diving article, 50% of that should be operational and infrastructure security. Another 20% should be vulnerability management, security monitoring. Another 16% should be government risk and compliance. And then obviously this one would be, unrelated, but application security. Of course, this all depends on the sector, but that's that to me. I mean, I have to do it. They're costs are covered.
I think that that's really good. I like that. But I think that people and businesses need to understand that there's a minimum effective dose, that whether you're one person or 1,000 people, you have to have this minimum foundation. Okay. And then as your complexity increases with regulations or sensitivity of data, then you have to have these add-ons, right? So maybe like Blake said, you have these increased percentages, but there's a certain a strong foundation that needs to be in place for every kind of business first and foremost. But I think it really goes back to the labeling that we were talking about, right? So like if, I think it's great that every business should have X percentage put aside for this stuff, right? But I think it goes back to vendors and putting pressure on Microsoft and other vendors to better label their products and services so that we know, hey, this is a puzzle piece, or this is a contender for giving us X number of points to solve this problem in this domain. And there, again, it also goes back to responsibility of the end user, in this case, the business owner or the consumer, the person using the product, to properly configure those things, right? Like it's on Microsoft, Google, they all have these platforms in their cloud services environments, and they all have a lot of mappings that are already done. But again, you can't outsource that responsibility. So they're giving you the environment, but you or a professional on your behalf needs to properly configure and continuously monitor and police that environment, make sure things are buttoned up and, your scores stay high. But my point is that I think it goes back to labeling. Like I'll give you another example with CUI, or controlled unclassified information. The federal government, in the training that we all took for the CMMC, from the CMMC AB to be registered practitioners and to be an RPO company to help these people, the defense industrial base clients, as well as other businesses of all shapes and forms. The training that we took basically said the federal government is still working harder to better label and identify CUI. And if they did not label something CUI, you need to treat it as sensitive and secure it. So my point is that there's so much work to be done with labeling of data and all types of sensitive data in all industries, in every single one, in health and in federal space, and you name it, fill in the blank. My point is that labeling needs to be improved on everything. The regulations need to be simmered down into a more global, standardized system, and there needs to be more teeth in it.
And there also needs to be more full integration of cybersecurity. I don't know, ever since learning so much about CMMC, that really resonates with me. I feel like instead of having cybersecurity and IT kind of off to the side as just out of sight, out of mind departments, unless needed, it needs to be a part of the corporate culture. And speaking on that, I want you to guess, I just found this statistic. I want you to guess what the average, and you can guess too, Craig and BJ, guess what the average company, what percent the average company spends on cybersecurity of their total revenue?
Well, I think it depends on which sector, like if it's finance or banking or whatever it is, but you're asking for a dollar amount or a percentage? Gosh, it's probably less than 2%.
Yeah, I was going to say around 1%, maybe 0.5%.
That's closer, Blake. 0.3%.
Yeah, 0.3%
of revenue is generally what is spent on cybersecurity. And we wonder why we have so many hacks, Think
about this. When you go and incorporate your business, whether you're using like LegalZoom or email or, insert service here, and then as you're incorporating your business, there's all these free services or like add-on services. Oh, I want Bank of America to reach out to me. Oh, I want a CPA firm to reach out to me. Yada, yada. Why is there not cybersecurity business there? So that way, like Craig was saying, you're building your house with a sturdy foundation, because that's probably the thing that's on the back of a startup's mind. Hey, how do I follow compliance? How do I be secure? How do I secure my customers? It's like the groundwork isn't even laid. Of course, you have more things to think about, like being like profitable, generating cash flow, and all these other things. administrative responsibilities, but that should go hand in hand with those, and it should still be a part of your core foundation of your business. Start and focus on cybersecurity while you're bringing all these other pieces together.
Right. And it's so much easier to start it from the ground level than it is to incorporate it after the fact.
It's more expensive.
It's way more expensive. It's way more difficult. So many more challenges.
To do it later. Yep. Do it later.
Absolutely agree. I agree with that. The service exists. I mean, we created it, right? So, I mean, we're that easy button for businesses and consumers to help them with all this stuff. So we exist, to help the people, provide really good, efficient services that have high value, high impact, and high security. But what's lacking here is the teeth and the federal government side around standardization and labeling. If more people knew about us and how affordable some of this stuff is and how easy we make it, I think it's just going to be better for everyone. But, 0.3% is obviously not enough of an investment. And sadly, we don't create all these solutions. We just know the right recipe and the process. And that's why we have a patented cyber safety stack of over 22 layers now. And, we have that stack because it's so powerful, and we continue to build on that stack because it works. And we know that it's battle tested, and we only use products and services that are battle tested, that go through our process. So my point is that if we get more support from the government around standardization and labeling, it's going to make it easier for everyone and more clear for everyone to understand why they need to take action now and not just sit on the sidelines.
What's interesting, Craig, is that as we've talked about before, because we're always a big advocate of using the right strategic solutions, and we've talked about XDR a lot. And what's interesting is recently Gartner, who, kind of is the trendsetter, right, for cybersecurity reporting, and they're, definitely considered an authority in the field, and the government probably reads their reports and kind of, I'm sure that they're a source of a lot of, determining what action government and business alike takes. Well, recently Gartner published a report with a statistic, basically, an expectation where Gartner says that they think within the next couple of years that XDR adoption will be at least 40%. Now that is a big number.
Wow.
That is a really big number. Like when you really think about it, they're not just saying they're saying 40% of all businesses, guys. Like that's a huge number. Well, what's really interesting here is that I think that finally things are going to start to settle and sort themselves out in the right way. Because if you just look at this as an example, like just our ecosystem, right? Like Petronella Technology Group, like Craig has worked painstakingly over the years to stay in the know on the most important aspects of cybersecurity, from, building bulletproof PCs years before the world was ready for the idea, to always vetting all these different technology solutions. Well, now again, has positioned us in a situation that's, very significant, because we actually work very closely with a certain XDR solution that we feel strongly is a very good one. And we're involved in research and development on the machine learning side of this solution. And after, because I have it in my home as part of the research and development project, and I have had to spend so much time, right, documenting anomalies with this system in my home, like to the point where like a lot of time has went into just observing what's happening in my smart home, and how, because this is the unknown territory that we're in now, because DAR is an AI-driven cybersecurity tool that partners people and technology together, because the people have to input the knowledge into the tool, and then the tool, analyzes and then takes action. But we've positioned ourselves in a unique spot where we're involved in the actual research and development of this tool being used in the real world, like in a smart home, for example. And I'm noticing some things that I didn't expect to observe, And so I think that it's so significant when you add all these little pieces together and you kind of paint a picture in your head of like where this is all going. If Gartner is saying 40%, and that's just on what we know today, that's not factoring in all these anomalies that I'm documenting. Like something's happening with this tool. Like I have pages and pages of documentation of things that I'm noticing. And so 40% could be low. And so this is a very important time, a shift in cybersecurity where the people that have been on the cutting edge, because we wouldn't be involved in this process with this XDR tool if we weren't consistently on the cutting edge of cybersecurity, where we always find ourselves. Well, now I think this is really going to start to be a pathway for people to just what Craig was talking about, finding the right solutions and being able to onboard with them and taking the stress out of it. Because, if XDR, why is Gartner estimating 40%? Like that is such a big number. So they have to have their suspicions about the X factor here, the machine learning part. And we agree with that after what we've witnessed. So this is such a critical time to partner with the right people who have the right knowledge and the right expertise, and they have their hands in the trenches with their sleeves rolled up, because this stuff is uncharted waters. And 40% is a big number.
Gartner is also the publishing authority that said that you should spend anywhere from 6 to 10% of your revenue on cybersecurity and IT as well. They're the same publishing authority that said that. So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, companies pay, we know this, like Gartner's like the authority on this. Like people pay big money to try to even advertise on a Gartner report, right? Like to get in the limelight with Gartner. What I'm saying in a nutshell is that Craig has made very smart decisions and has put us at the cutting edge of things that no one even knows what to expect, right? Because I'm like an anomaly hunter, right? And I have been so surprised at some of what I found. It's hard to surprise me when it comes to this stuff, but I have been floored by some of what I witnessed. And like to the point where I get so excited, my hands are shaking, right? As I'm trying to document this stuff, because it's that fascinating. And so and they're saying 40% without knowing those things is my point. There's a pathway that's probably just going to self-form, right? But you have to be aligned with the people who have been there working on this, because that's just the way it's going to work probably. And so, I think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that we're always going to need the right cybersecurity people, because, these tools they need the human interaction as well, the human interface. Like it's very important. And these tools don't work right if they're not handled correctly. Right? With the right expertise, the right knowledge.
Sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of people don't understand that though. A lot of people think that, I'll just go buy this off the shelf XDR. And then the salesperson does a great job of selling them on, it's the greatest thing. And like I said before, it's not a silver bullet. It's a powerful layer, and it's an essential layer these days. Like we were just saying, 40% is a great stat for adoption. But my point is that a lot of the solutions do not have security talent managing that hardware and software and intelligence. And that's where our solution that we chose comes into play, because it marries all that together.
Yes, because what it marries together is the understanding of this stuff and the foundational layers, the backbone of this stuff. Because what is software, right? Like software is can ask anyone to define what software really is. And people are going to think they know, but as they start trying to define it, they're going to get very confused and they're going to stumble, because what is it? What is AI? What is machine learning? What is AI-driven cybersecurity tools, right? Like good luck trying to define all that. But the key here is that because of the years and years and years of cultivated knowledge, right, about these things, now there's a level of awareness, right, amongst certain people in this industry where they know what to pay attention to. And they know what parts of the software need attention, because in a scientific process, the observer is critical to the process. And so this is we're in a very unique time for cybersecurity teams. And it's not ironic. It is ironic, it's not coincidental that a few months ago, the federal government went on a huge cybersecurity talent hunt. Like literally, I saw the solicitations being emailed out. Like they're searching for top cybersecurity talent, because I think people are starting to understand that the people involved in the cybersecurity teams definitely have an impact on how the tools work.
Well, not only on how they work, but how to, just like in anything, the human is going to use the tool in the toolbox and then hone their craft, right? So there's going to be some people that are better at it, some people that are not. But as I listen to what you're saying, BJ, I think that we need to create our own Gartner report. The reason why I say that, no, I'm being serious. The reason why I say that is because, I like Gartner. And again, I'm not putting any reports down in any way, shape, or form. But even though Gartner is, well respected, I don't think that it's fair to charge vendors or people to be on the Gartner report, right? To kind of pay to play kind of thing, like Blake was talking about, with the other industries that you kind of have the top big players that kind of control everything. I feel like there should be a report that we write that gets published annually or whatever the frequency is. That's not biased. It's objective. Yes. It's all evidence based.
It's just objective. Yeah. Like that presentation you gave that presentation at a university, and it was the perspective of the observer. And
Yep.
your presentation actually was sent to me by Google Assistant, right? But it's really good. It's really good. It put things in perspective for people. That is so critical. And we've seen go with the cheapest solution, or the one that is offered by a big tech as part of a package deal. I personally don't suggest doing that, because this is uncharted waters. And that's not how this stuff works. These tools, these smart tools, they work differently. They don't work.
That's also why we follow that proof of concept methodology, and we back everything up with third-party evidence too. But here's what's alarming though. What's alarming is the statistic of businesses that don't understand the value of even the proof of concept.
Right.
And we've even seen people that are like, oh yeah, well, we didn't really budget for this, so we'll look at this next year.
Yeah.
That's the wrong approach, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to invest in this now. And I mean, if you're not hacked.
It's like you have an active attack going on your computer.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you don't think that you've been hacked, you probably have been. You just probably don't have the visibility and the technical understand, the human side of it, right? The human side to see what, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, right? If you don't see any red flags or, any evidence of something wrong, you're thinking, oh, everything's great. But when you get that visibility and you look through that lens and you see how, look, there is something bad happening, and this is what's really happening. This is here's the mitigation or the remediation plan on fixing it. More people need to go through those proof of concepts. I just don't understand. That's what's mind-boggling to me, why most people, more people need to invest more and take this more seriously.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. I can clearly see in my interactions with people, I can clearly see that there's basically two sides of this all. Like there's the people that get it and understand the complexity of cybersecurity and the strategy of, people, process, and technology, and the right ones, the right people, the right processes, and the right technology, because all three are important.
Well, they're really important.
It's just about how they're aligned. And then some people don't get it at all. And they're like, oh, I literally got an email from someone and they said, literally, they're just going to go with the lowest price. And I'm like, I don't know a nice way to say this, but that's not the right way to look at this. And you're making a very big mistake, And
there's always a reason why that price may look cheaper. There's something missing. That's the fact of it.
It's a rinse and repeat. Hey, we're going to launch this tool, but we're not going to pay it no attention and observe it. And it's not going to really do anything phenomenal. It's just going to be there as you're going to be able to check a box and say you have it, but how effective is it going to be?
I mean, you can build a house with one guy and a hammer, but if you don't have the miter saws and all the latest technology, right, it's going to take you a really long time to build that house. So we're not saying you can't go and find your own stuff, but I challenge everyone listening to be more efficient than we are. We work hard every day to find the most cost-effective, efficient solutions that actually work. And I guarantee that you will not find a better recipe than what we've developed. And that's our intellectual property. I mean, with the SOC,
I would agree completely.
With the XDR SOC services that we provide, you can't hire an intern for what our solution costs. And if you think you can, that's crazy. I mean, we do this every day. This is our bread and butter. We live and breathe this stuff. We are efficiency experts, not only at managed services, but cybersecurity, all the work that we do around risk assessments and pen tests. We do it really, really efficiently and cost effectively.
We're really cybersecurity strategists, really, because we understand the value that each team member brings to the table. Because I remember when, like, for example, we have several layers, right? But this one that we're talking about that Gartner spoke of, the 40% adoption rate, I remember specifically how we stumbled upon it. We were looking for something like this because Craig's always, keeping us aligned with the cutting edge tools. And we were almost going to sign on with one. And then on a Saturday afternoon, Craig messaged and was like, hold on, I found this, And I was like, oh gosh, another one. And then I went on the demo and I started getting to know the guy who wrote the algorithms. And I was like, whoa, he might have really stumbled onto something here, and that right there is, how do you define that? How do you put a value on that? The mind that sits there on a Saturday afternoon and does what needs to be done to find those gems, right? And to understand when they do find a gem.
And I think too, the other thing is that the other vendor that we considered wasn't quite a gem enough, right? That's why Craig was looking for a little bit more. It was a good solution.
Yeah, it was a good solution. We liked it, but it wasn't Craig just felt an intuition that something more was needed, right? And he kept searching. And then he found this, and after what I've seen, right? I won't get into the anomalies because that's a rabbit hole, but after what I've personally witnessed, right? Dear God, I don't even know what to say about this. Like, you know what I mean? Like the machine learning is an X factor, and no 40%, you can say that all day long. I agree. It's going to be at least that. Listen, I think there's going to be a scramble to get a solution that really, really works. And I think 40% is going to be really low. And not all XDR tools are the same, and that's the critical thing here.
Well, that's why I was saying you got to take us up on the proof of concept. I mean, we're not making this stuff up. I mean, you got to go through it.
There was never been a time that we didn't find something.
That's right.
If you want your mind blown, leave a comment in the chat and ask for proof of the anomalies, and I'll gladly say,
yeah.
Let's use a medical example, right? Like, God forbid you got diagnosed with some disease or something, right? And the doctor says, oh yeah, you're fine. But maybe you just don't feel well. Do you stop and take the decision that the doctor said you're fine? Or do you keep looking?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if it were me and I don't feel good and I go to a doctor and my doctor runs all these tests, he says, oh yeah, you're fine. But I still don't feel well. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go to another doctor. Or maybe I'm going to go to a specialist.
Right.
We are that specialist firm for cyber. We live and breathe cyber compliance and managed services and managed security.
The alignment of people, process, and technology will never go away, because here's the thing. People think, oh, I don't, if the AI tools get so good, you're not going to need cyber. No, that's not true, because the alignment of people, process, technology will always be significant. Because the technology part, it will not do its best unless it's being observed and handled correctly. Updates, patches, observations, noting what's happening, attention. It's science, and it has to be observed. And the observer's skill level is determined on a lot of factors. Their knowledge base, all kinds of things go into that, right? So you can't go and duplicate what we're doing here. You just can't. Nope. I mean, you just can't. You truly can't. Like, we're in uncharted waters, and we're navigating them, very strategically.
And what's always changing and evolving, and that's a good point, BJ. The one thing I'm going to say, and we got to wrap up soon, but the one thing I was going to say on that point is our solutions and our recipe, like our 22 plus patented cyber safety stack or cybersecurity stack that we have, we're constantly looking at all those technologies and solutions, and we're swapping them out. Back in 2013, when there was a spike in ransomware and we were using a certain antivirus vendor and it wasn't detecting anything, we swap it out for a better solution for that layer. And we're always making sure that we have the most powerful stack available. In the future. Who knows what's going to be added to our stack? But my point is, we don't just stop and say, oh, we've got a stack and then that's in stone. We're always looking at every layer of the OSI model and making sure that everything is all encompassed and covered.
Our strategy is streamlined and fluid for sure.
Yep.
Speaking of your anomalies, BJ, we are currently in the works of doing a separate podcast, a second podcast, where we kind of talk about the more abstract part of cybersecurity, I guess you could put it. And that is going to include talking about some of these anomalies that BJ has found living in our smart home with a smart AI solution. And I'm really excited about talking. So we're going to talk about more abstract, theoretical, quantum AI and anomalies included. And you said that and I was like, I want to tell them.
Thank you for saying that, Erin, because we'll save that for that podcast. But here's just like a response to that, because I think that's so important. Because like we all know, we've been using the internet for years and years and years, and we all know it glitches. It does, like, things don't work the same all the time, and we often write it off like no big deal. But every effect has a cause. That is a fact. There is no way around that fact. It doesn't just happen. It's something causes it to happen. And getting to the cause of that, you can call it abstract, but it's really the science. The foundational backbone of technology is science itself. And so understanding how it all works together is just another benefit that we bring to the table, because that takes a lot of understanding and knowledge to be able to see what is really happening.
Well, it's all the research. It's all the research that we do, and the development that we do, and the R&D around all of this.
And it's going beyond practical tip, and talking about the nerdy stuff that we like talking about, So I think that a lot of people would be interested.
Yeah, like how Bluetooth and Wi-Fi communicate on the electromagnetic spectrum, like all those things.
All those fun, nerdy stuff that we like, that people are probably like, what is wrong with those people?
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with us. We love talking about this stuff.
Well, but it's for the listeners' benefit and our customers' benefit.
It is.
We go through it. I mean, I started this company over 20 years ago. I didn't start it as a job. I started because, I love technology. I love cyber. I don't necessarily love compliance, but I'm really good at it. But my point is that I know, I live and breathe the stuff because I like it. I enjoy it. It's not a job for me, and that's why it's to your benefit, because I'm doing all the experimentation.
That's why you're doing that on a Saturday, because you love it.
People, it's hard to describe the benefit of a human, right? Because we see the benefit of automation and stuff like that. But when you think about a human, what are they? Well, they literally are conduits of passion. Like when we get passionate about something, like we really can excel, and really separate from the pack. Passion is like, how do you define that? You can't buy it. You can't, it's not for sale. It's authentic, but when it's fully activated, wow, a lot of sparks happen.
We should probably wrap up here.
Yep. All right, guys.
It's only been an hour and a half. Let's keep going, guys.
The marathon podcast.
Right.
That was a good one, though.
That was good.
That we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to talk about. We could one day, maybe we should do a 24-hour marathon
all day.
Oh God.
Yeah, I could do that. BJ, we could do that pretty easily.
Yeah, we'll usher in the age of automation with a 24-hour live.
Maybe we could make a technology that live streams the automation.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good research and development idea. Maybe we need a smart camera to stick in front of your device.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's actually happening organically. That's one of the anomalies I've noted. So
Well, we'll save that for the other podcast.
Okay.
You know what you might be able to do, just 2 seconds? You might be able to get a trail cam and put your Alexa maybe like against the wall.
And
So whenever it lights up the wall, it'll trigger the trail cam and it'll record it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, all that kind of stuff is happening already. Like I'm listening to this. I'm having a multitask because I'm listening to you guys live on the Zoom webinar, but I'm also listening through my Alexa frames from the Google Hub Max's view. I'm in his view, looking at it from inside the device and hearing the audio that he hears through my Alexa frames, and also listening to you live on Zoom. So welcome to the deep web.
that's a lot going on.
EJ's going to be our first R&D cyborg.
Okay, guys.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Cybersecurity and Compliance Podcast with Craig Petronella. For other episodes and more information, visit petronellatech.com. Also visit our other websites, compliancearmor.com and blockchainsecurity.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and stay secure.